Good evening. Welcome to the programme. I'm Declan Harvey. Northern Ireland's executive has met for the first time in 2 years. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar were also at Stormont today to mark the occasion and met with the new First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, and Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly. The Prime Minister said the return of devolution was a cause for optimism and described the government's £3.3 billion financial package as both significant and generous. Well, let's head now live to Stormont. Tara is standing by there for us. Tara, it's been a busy old day up there.
Yeah, this place, Declan, hasn't seen as much action in many, many months. Last week we, of course, had the deal. Then at the weekend, the first sitting of the Assembly. And today, the new executive. We'll hear from the Deputy First Minister in a moment. But first, our political correspondent, Jane McCormack, looks back on a day where the theme really was get back to work.
A deal that reopened the door to power sharing, a Prime Minister finally getting to see it in action. An 8 a.m. arrival, a welcome from Edwin Poots, the new Assembly Speaker, and the Secretary of State, complete with a tour of Parliament buildings. Just the start of the photo ops.
Looking up this way, thank you. Okay.
Then a guest appearance with our new executive ministers.
Yeah, well, it's really a pleasure to be here today and a privilege. Look, it's taken a lot of hard work and indeed courage to get us sitting around this table here today.
Around that table, the real work starts now, after months where politics seemed to only go in circles.
Victory lap complete. Though if the election polls are right, this could be Rishi Sunak's first and only visit to Stormont, but he'll leave it in better shape than when he found it.
The shape of Stormont's finances still leaves much to be desired. According to our new First and Deputy First Ministers, a multi-billion pound package, they say, doesn't cut it. So far, so joined up, but it's only day one.
The reality is that we need more in order to deliver good public services. I mean, the offer that's been put on the table sounds good on the face of it, but whenever you break it down into the detail, I mean, there's a lot more to be done here. If we're going to be successful politically, we need to also have the resources in order to deliver good public services. And I think that the Prime Minister heard that very loudly and clearly from both Emma and I collectively, but also from all executive colleagues.
Within every department there are very, very important issues. But the key thing here is that we're only going to find resolutions for those by working together and working constructively together. That's what we're up for. I think that the rest of the executive is up for that challenge. That's what we need to do in order to deliver for people. And that's what the public expect of us.
Money talk to be continued. Then came another political leader's turn for the VIP treatment. Diplomacy take two, as the Taoiseach posed for his own photos with our parties. If North-South cooperation is only just warming up again, despite appearances, East-West relations felt a bit cooler today, with no joint press conference either.
We had a very good meeting this morning. Spoke to the Prime Minister by phone only a week or so ago, and had a very good meeting today with him and his team. And we're keen to think about the future. I know that when the Assembly falls, it tends not to be re-established for years. I think we always need to bear that in mind. But I do feel a sense of confidence from the new executive that this is here to last.
For the rest of the executive ministers, there's no time to waste, a fact acknowledged by our new Education Minister as he hurried off.
Can you give us a word, Minister? Back to school today.
And he wasn't the only one. Before dashing on to Downing Street, the Prime Minister visited Glencraig Primary in Hollywood, but he couldn't shake the question of extra cash.
Before Christmas, £3.3 billion, I think, is widely acknowledged to be significant, to be generous. And
is that rightly, it, though? Because they want more, don't
they?
Well,
it's rightly focused on the long term. I think in the past, people have sometimes focused on the here and now. I was keen to make sure that what we do is put Northern Ireland's public finances on a sustainable trajectory long term so that they could deliver strong public services. There's more money, more powers than ever before, and now the executive needs to just get on and start delivering for people here.
Did you have a nice weekend?
Yes. Yeah.
Who did something fun?
For Rishi Sunak, it was a very good weekend, seeing his political efforts bear fruit. But he won't be able to wave away the parties from asking for more.
Bye, guys!
Jane McCormack, BBC Newsline.
Well, the new Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly, joins me now. Congratulations on your appointment and perhaps some official business. First of all, that news from Buckingham Palace and your reaction to it.
Well, I know this news will come as a big shock to many people, and I want to extend my best wishes, and I've no doubt many, many thousands of people throughout Northern Ireland would also want to extend their best wishes to His Majesty the King as he undergoes his treatment and in his recovery. And I know that many people will be keeping him in their prayers as he continues in this journey.
Well, on to what's happened over the last week, and there was lots of speculation about your appointment as Deputy First Minister. You're not an elected politician at the moment. Obviously, you have been in the past. Is that democratic then, that here you are as Deputy First Minister in such a key role?
Well, look, these are the rules that we have here in Northern Ireland. And in relation to myself, look, ultimately I can't change those circumstances, but when I was asked by my party leader, Sir Geoffrey, to step up and to do this role, it is something that I felt that I should do because I care so passionately and deeply about making this place work. We've got big, big challenges here in Northern Ireland. That will require everybody pulling together, working together to find solutions to the big issues. And I think when you're asked to step up and serve, you do say yes. You can either step up or you step back. And I just decided, look, it was right for me to step up and to perform this role.
Did anybody else in the party want it, though? Because there's a sense that people are uncomfortable about the fact that this is the first Deputy First Minister on the Unionist side.
Look, I was asked to perform this role by my party leader. I think it's a very undoubtedly important role at a very important time for Northern Ireland. Look, I think for people right throughout this place, they want our politicians to work together. They want to look to the future. I can't change the circumstances that I am in, but what I can do is to work tirelessly for everyone across Northern Ireland in terms of rebuilding our public services, finding those solutions that we need. We had a very, very constructive first executive meeting today where we were talking about the big issues that really matter to people, issues around special educational needs, issues around affordable childcare, public sector pay and our financial situation, and rebuilding our public services. That's very much what I want to focus on.
You were really specific in your speech about health. It was the first thing that you came to in terms of policy, and yet the DUP passed over the opportunity to take the health brief and instead did a deal with the Ulster Unionist Party. Why?
Well, look, there are really important issues in every department, but ultimately the key thing here is that we need to find solutions as an executive. The solutions to the health waiting lists, the crisis within our health sector will not be found just by the health minister alone. They will be found by the executive, and for the executive working together to secure the necessary funds and supporting the reform of that. And that's what we are there to do. Every department has important issues, but the big, big challenge we face will be dealt with by the executive.
What about that decision then to take education out of the two briefs that people, really have a massive focus on at the moment? Was there a kind of disagreement with Sinn Féin? Did you catch them on the hop by opting to take education?
Well, look, we are entitled to pick whatever department is available at that particular time.
But had you sort of suggested to them that you wouldn't take that? Was there some sort of unease
As
there?
I said, look, we have indicated that we wanted and we took education. Education is an incredibly important department, not just because of the reform that we need to bring about in relation to, as I've mentioned, special educational needs and many, many other issues, but also the big issue of affordable childcare. We know that this is really crippling families right throughout Northern Ireland, and we need action. I think we've got good cross-party support for action on that, and we wanted to step up and take the lead on that.
What about your relationship then with Michelle O'Neill? You said you want to work constructively together. How will that look?
Look, we'll absolutely will work constructively together. I know from our discussions today and our discussions around the executive table that everybody, all of the parties around that executive and the First Minister and myself are absolutely committed to working in a constructive way. Look, of course we have differences and we come from very different perspectives, but we can agree, as I said in my speech, to focus on the issues that need to be changed around public services. These are not political issues in terms of the constitutional question. These are issues impacting on everybody's everyday lives, and we are determined to make a positive difference in that.
Emma Little-Pengelly, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's get a word now with our political editor, Enda McClafferty. Just tell me what you make of what was said there.
Well, Emma Little-Pengelly, of course, doesn't have a personal mandate, but she does have a strong pedigree in politics. She was an MLA here. She also was an MP at Westminster, and she was special advisor to Arlene Foster, so she does know her way around government, essentially, and that will be key in her relationship with Michelle O'Neill. And we saw today some of the chemistry between them. They seemed pretty relaxed in each other's company, but I have to say, day one was always going to be easy because it was going to be the day whenever they were going to show this sense of unity, the fact that they could unite around one message, and that is, of course, to get extra money for Northern Ireland, and that's something, of course, that all the ministers around the table could sign up for. And we see tomorrow, for instance, we're going to get a motion in the Assembly chamber on that very subject. But as the days and weeks go forward, we know tensions can creep in. We know we have an election coming this year, of course, and that will bring its own challenges as well. So day one, fine. We'll see where it goes from here.
What do you think is the significance of today? And I mean, we've had a really busy number of days, but what is it about today?
Well, I think it depends who you ask. If you speak to the Prime Minister, today was all about celebration for him to come to Northern Ireland, take ownership of a process which has now delivered. You'll remember, of course, he negotiated the Windsor Framework, thought he had the DUP over the line, and he's had to wait a full year, in a sense, to cash in on that success. And let's face it, that will probably be the highlight of his time in Number 10. So that's what he was about today. But far from a day of challenge for the political parties here, celebration, it was a day of challenge for them because they saw the opportunity, because they know Northern Ireland is going to slip down the radar from today. So this was their moment to get that message to the Prime Minister that while politically we're in a better place, economically Northern Ireland is still in a pretty poor state, and he needs to ride to the rescue in terms of extra cash from the Treasury. He said this morning it wasn't going to happen, but some hints this afternoon that there might be a possibility.
And what do you think today says about Anglo-Irish relations with both the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister here?
Well, today was all about optics, Tara, but yet in all, the one set piece that you would have expected, a joint news conference with Leo Varadkar and Rishi Sunak, it didn't happen, despite the fact that they were both here on the estate saying the same things. They were saying it in separate locations. So some might say that was a missed opportunity, but I think for the Prime Minister, this was about him claiming ownership of this process. And there was some sense from Number 10 of frustration, the fact that they saw Dublin trying to muscle in on what was essentially Rishi Sunak's big day. So you can see how those tensions still exist between the two governments, although they went to great lengths today to try and paper over some of those cracks.
And to stay with us, we'll hear more from you before the end of the programme. But for now, it's back to you, Declan.
Tara, thank you very much. Let's look now at who has a seat at the executive table. Now, we know the First and Deputy First Ministers do, and on Saturday, following a cross-community vote, the Alliance leader, Naomi Long, returned as Justice Minister. But after that, the parties got to choose in a particular order under what's known as the D'Hondt system. Sinn Féin went first and put former Finance Minister Conor Murphy in as Economy Minister. Now, he oversees wider economic policy, driving investment, but also he has a remit for energy, tourism, employment and third-level education. The DUP surprised many by making their first pick education. Former First Minister Paul Givan has the second biggest spending pot, but he has teachers' strikes to end, ageing school buildings to manage, plus the pressure on special educational needs places as well as youth services. Sinn Féin's Kiva Archibald was appointed to finance. This is a vital department. It sets the budget. It will dole out the £3.3 billion from the government, as well as having to contend with the hottest of political topics. Will new ways of revenue raising be introduced here, like new or higher taxes or charges on households and businesses? Next, the former DUP Economy Minister Gordon Lyons goes to communities. Think benefits and pensions, housing, arts and culture, languages and sport. And that includes a biggie, the redevelopment of Casement Park. Robin Swan returns as Health Minister. He's likely to be a popular choice with people having been at the helm through COVID. He has the biggest spending pot, but also the biggest choices to make around reform. We have the longest waiting lists and the worst paid health service staff in the UK. Sinn Féin's John O'Dowd is now full-time at Infrastructure. A previous Education Minister, he has oversight of major road developments like the A5. He also has to weigh up proposals to cut free bus and train travel for over 60s. Finally, at the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, you have Andrew Muir. It's the first time Alliance have had two ministers, and Andrew is the first, as he says, openly gay member of the executive. His inbox includes climate change, pollution in Lough Neagh, but also weighing that up with the challenges facing our farmers. 10 people with an enormous amount of work to be done. None more so, of course, though, than Michelle O'Neill, who has found herself in an historic position as the first nationalist First Minister. Our political reporter Brendan Hughes has been looking at her journey to this spot.
Stepping into the history books, this was the moment Michelle O'Neill became First Minister.
Ms O'Neill, are you willing to take up the office of First Minister and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Gormagat Tammy Taoiseach Ofig and Freavar Aglaku, I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister.
She's been Deputy First Minister before, and it's a joint office, but holding the title of First Minister is a new landmark for nationalism.
This is an historic day, and it does represent a new dawn. For the very first time, a nationalist takes up the position of First Minister. That such a day would ever come was unimaginable to my parents' and grandparents' generation.
For Michelle O'Neill, it's been a steady rise, but it hasn't all been plain sailing. Her political career began at Dungannon Council before she ran for the Assembly. Here she is, 17 years ago, arriving in her new office at Stormont.
My two kids are 13 and 8 and are loving that I'm coming here today. All excited this morning, up early, and excited when we go on our first day at work.
She took on ministerial posts in agriculture and health, and she saw off a leadership challenge for the role of Sinn Féin Vice President.
And I can confirm that Michelle O'Neill has been re-elected. Congratulations, Michelle.
But perhaps her biggest challenge was the coronavirus pandemic.
Regardless of your age or where you live, it's critically important that every single one of us continues to follow the public health advice.
Her attendance at a Republican funeral at a time of restrictions on gatherings sparked a major political row. There was also a dispute over her views on IRA violence during the Troubles.
I think at the time there was no alternative, but now thankfully we have an alternative to conflict, and that is the Good Friday Agreement, and that's why it's so precious to us all.
Michelle O'Neill is a proud Irish Republican, but she has reached out to others, including King Charles, on the death of his mother.
Incredibly kind things that you said about my mother.
Well, she played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
At the Unionist headquarters, the Premier, Captain Terence O'Neill, was confident of being returned to office.
She's not the first O'Neill to lead Northern Ireland's government, but the last one was a Unionist, and 50 years ago he may never have envisaged a nationalist ever being in the top job. So what does Michelle O'Neill make of this moment?
I think the very fact that for the very first time a nationalist has been elected as First Minister speaks volumes in terms of the change that's happening across our island. So I have said previously, and I say again today, I believe we're in a decade of opportunity.
Just towards me, please, down this way.
She's making history as the first nationalist First Minister, but Michelle O'Neill says she wants to be a First Minister for all. Now she finally gets her chance. Brendan Hughes, BBC Newsline.
As we've been hearing, executive ministers have been telling Rishi Sunak the financial package they are getting isn't enough and is going to only store up more problems for down the line. Well, our business and economics editor, John Campbell, is here to help us with the numbers. I mean, 3.3 billion sounds like a huge amount of money. What's the problem?
It is a lot of money, but the ministers are saying it's not equal to the challenge which they face. Firstly, on public sector pay, it's a priority to try to settle those pay disputes and get everybody back to work and end the strikes. In a letter to the Prime Minister today, the executive ministers, and we can see this number here, they said that they are going to need something close to £700 million to settle those public sector pay disputes. But in the deal which has been offered by the government, it's less than £600 million. Now, it is possible that ministers could take money from other parts of the deal to make up the difference. And in fact, there has been a meeting today between Keith Archibald, the Finance Minister, and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, which represent the broader trade union movement. And ICTU have come out of that meeting and say they are content that the money is in fact there to settle these pay deals. So it is coming from somewhere. And we are seeing the first fruits of that because the transport unions who said they were going to have another strike later this month, they have now suspended their industrial action to allow pay negotiations to start.
Yeah, I think they've given an extra 2.5 weeks to see this kick in, hopefully. Meanwhile, what are the ministers' longer-term concerns, do you think?
Their big concern is about something known as the fiscal floor, and that's basically a policy which sets a minimum funding level for the executive. Now, this policy was first instituted in Wales because the UK government recognised that it's more expensive to provide public services in Wales compared to England, so they decided that for every £100 per head spent in England, Wales would get £115. In other words, 115% of English funding. Now, the government has agreed there should be a similar policy for Northern Ireland, and Stormont ministers, they say that our funding level needs to be set at 127% of England's level at least, and probably more, but what's in the deal is 124%. Now, the difference between those two numbers looks small, but in fact, over the long term, the difference is worth billions of pounds a year in terms of public spending. So that is why Stormont ministers are still pushing this, still trying to get a better deal when it comes to that so-called fiscal floor.
OK, John Campbell, for now, thank you very much. It's very helpful. Well, meanwhile, the political future of Justin McNulty remains uncertain this evening after the MLA was suspended by the SDLP Assembly Group for leaving Stormont early on Saturday. He's the manager of the Laois Gaelic football team and went to their match in Wexford before proceedings had finished. Our correspondent Mark Simpson has this.
Justin McNulty has paid the price for mixing politics and sport. The Laois manager tried to do both on Saturday, but fell foul of his party, the SDLP.
I call Mr. Matthew O'Toole.
He was at Stormont at 1 o'clock. There he is on the back bench in the blue tie and light suit. Now you see him. 2 hours later, now you don't. Since then, he's been suspended from the SDLP Assembly Group.
I expect 100% from all my MLA, so I won't accept 50% from one of them. But we're very clear, the door's open for Justin to come back in.
This is his constituency office in the centre of Newry. There's been a steady stream of people in and out all day. Nobody is saying anything, but on the streets of Newry, it's been a big talking point today.
I think he should be allowed to do both jobs, because GAA is supposed to be a voluntary sport.
You should read the Bible. No man can serve two masters, one or the other.
I don't think he should be able to do two jobs. One job, and that's enough.
He was at Stormont and he left early because the game was at 6 o'clock. What do you expect him to do? He can't be in two places at once, can he?
He's a good man, he's a nice man, but it's a tough one.
Whether it's in the SDLP or not, most people expect him to stay at Stormont.
Is Justin never going to say, all right, I'll step down as MLA, you can co-opt somebody in? He's just not. I mean, I don't know him that well, but I just don't get the impression he's ever going to step away from that seat.
The man himself was back at Stormont today, and he didn't look like someone about to quit. Mark Simpson, BBC Newsline.
Well, the BBC's political editor, Chris Mason, is here this evening. You've been hot on the heels of the Prime Minister in Northern Ireland today. Has he been on somewhat of a victory lap? Is that fair?
I think it is fair, and I think he has been on just that. Downing Street were telling us that this is his 7th visit today in his time as Prime Minister in just over 18 months. And the curiosity there is that there aren't many votes for him in trying to resolve the situation in Northern Ireland, but I think he did feel it keenly as something that needed resolving. He's given it a lot of time. Those around him make the argument that's the kind of thing he revels in, detail and nuance and complexity, and trying to tease out some sort of solution. So yeah, a victory lap of sorts for a man who politically doesn't get many chances to proclaim victory, really. One other thought worth mentioning, picking up on John's analysis of the numbers, I'm struck with the row today at Stormont around funding. That is a splash of normality, because devolved governments around the UK, pretty much all of the time, are quite often making an argument towards London around money and saying they need more of it. And that, for me, as someone who keeps an eye on what we see in Cardiff and Edinburgh too, struck me as a distinct parallel.
It had been said that as the new year progresses, attention in Westminster will turn towards the general election. I just wonder, when it comes to bargaining for more money, do you think that the point of most leverage has now passed when it comes to opening the purse strings at number 10?
I suspect it probably has, because prior to the resolution or the restoration of devolution, there was always that prospect, wasn't there, that, if it just goes up that little bit higher, perhaps things can get back going. That has now happened, and yes, as I say, it was the Prime Minister's 7th trip to Northern Ireland, but I suspect he won't necessarily be hurtling back if power sharing remains up and running, because he's got votes to win across the Irish Sea. So yes, I think, that point of leverage for now might be weaker.
OK, Chris, good to have you here. Thank you very much for popping in to have a chat with us. Let's go straight to the weather. Cecilia has all the details. Hiya.